Lieutenant Alex Carter sat in the cockpit of the warship, his fingers tapping nervously on the control panel. The mission ahead was a dangerous one, but it was what he had trained for. He had been part of special forces for years, handling difficult and risky operations. But this one was different. The target was the most feared figure in the galaxy, the alien Empress Rilla. For years, Empress had waged war across the stars. Her fleet was unstoppable, and her empire vast and powerful. No one knew exactly how she had come to power, but her name alone was enough to send even the bravest soldiers into hiding. The humans had been fighting her empire for so long that it felt like the war would never end. Alex's orders were clear. Capture the Empress alive no matter what. The human government had determined that her capture would end the war. They believed that once she was in their hands, her empire would fall apart. It seemed simple enough, but Alex knew the risks. He had seen the destruction caused by Rilla's. Fleeton knew that this mission could easily turn into a trap. The warship flew silently through space, its engines barely making a sound. Alex's team was prepared, their equipment checked, and their plans set. They were going to infiltrate a hidden base on a remote planet where Rilla had been reported to be. The intel was solid, and they had waited for the right moment to strike. Now, that moment had arrived. The ship landed in a secluded clearing on the alien planet. Alex and his team suited up, double-checking their weapons. The planet's surface was harsh, with jagged rocks and barren landscapes. The air was thin, making each breath feel heavier than the last. But Alex pushed these thoughts aside. There was no time to worry about the environment. They had a job to do. They moved quickly and quietly, making their way toward the enemy compound. The base was well guarded, but Alex's team had trained for situations like this. They had a plan, and they would stick to it. As they approached the entrance, Alex couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The Empress was close. Inside the compound, it was eerily silent. The team split up to search for any signs of Rilla. They moved through narrow hallways, checking rooms and doors as they went. Finally, Alex's heart skipped a beat as he saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was her, the alien Empress. Rilla stood tall, her regal presence filling the space. She had a calm expression, her eyes cold and calculating. For a moment, Alex froze, unsure of what to do. He had imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was happening, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why wasn't she running? Why wasn't she fighting back? "Lieutenant Carter, I've been expecting you," Rilla said, her voice smooth and almost gentle. Alex's team took position behind him, weapons raised, but no one moved. The Empress didn't seem afraid. She didn't even seem worried. Instead, she simply stood there waiting. "Don't try anything, Empress," Alex said, his voice steady. "You're coming with us." Rilla's lips curled into a faint smile. "I don't think you understand. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Alex's gut tightened. He had heard stories about Rilla's mind games, her ability to manipulate situations and people. Was this some kind of trick? Was she trying to confuse him? "We don't have time for games," Alex said firmly. "Come quietly or things will get messy." The Empress didn't move. Instead, she stepped forward, and Alex's team tightened their grips on their weapons. But before they could react, the walls around them began to rumble. A low, deep vibration shook the entire compound. "Brace yourselves," Alex shouted, but it was too late. The room seemed to shift, and in an instant, a trapdoor opened beneath their feet. Alex barely had time to react as he and his team were plunged into darkness. The fall seemed endless, but eventually they landed on the cold, hard ground. For a moment, everything was silent. The only sound was the team's heavy breathing. Alex shook his head, trying to clear the confusion. What had just happened? How had they been caught so easily? He rose to his feet, scanning the dark room. His team was already moving, checking for any signs of danger. But there was no sign of Rilla. Had she known they were coming? Was this all part of her plan? "Stay sharp," Alex ordered, his voice low. "We need to find a way out of here." They moved through the dark, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they had walked into something much bigger than they had anticipated. It wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a game, and they were the pawns. Alex had thought they were the ones in control. He had thought they had captured the Empress. But in reality, it was her who had captured them. The darkness around Alex and his team seemed to close in on them. They had fallen into a trap, and now everything was uncertain. He tried to focus, his mind racing with questions. How had Rilla known they were coming? Was she always one step ahead? The mission had felt so straightforward, but now it was all unraveling. "Everyone check in," Alex ordered as he slowly stood up. His voice echoed in the silence, but the response from his team was only a few grunted affirmations. The fall had knocked the wind out of them, but no one seemed seriously hurt. Still, the situation was far from good. They had fallen into a large underground chamber. The walls were made of strange metal, not like anything Alex had seen before. It was cold and barren, with no signs of life, except for the faint hum of machinery in the distance. The entire place seemed to be abandoned, yet everything felt too clean, too precise. "What now, Lieutenant?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice filled with worry. "We find Rilla," Alex replied, his eyes scanning the shadows. "And we get answers." They moved forward cautiously, their steps echoing through the empty hallways. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive. It was clear that the compound had been built with secrecy in mind, but Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He had thought Rilla would have been confined somewhere, maybe locked in a cell. There was no sign of her, as they ventured deeper into the labyrinth of hallways. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced over his shoulder, but the team was focused ahead, their weapons raised. Every corner seemed to lead to another hallway, and every hallway looked the same. It was impossible to know if they were even heading in the right direction. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a large chamber. In the center of the room was a large table, surrounded by strange equipment. At the far end, a single figure stood, watching them. It was Rilla. She was alone, standing perfectly still, her arms crossed. "Empress," Alex called, his voice sharp. "Where are we? What is this place?" Rilla didn't respond right away. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step forward. Her eyes locked with Alex's, and for a moment, he felt a strange chill run down his spine. "I told you," she said, her voice calm, but filled with a quiet power. "This was always going to be your trap." Alex's soldiers tensed, but Alex held up his hand, signaling them to stand down. He needed answers. "Why didn't you fight back?" asked, confused. "Why didn't you try to escape when we had you?" Rilla smiled softly. It wasn't the cold smile of a conqueror, but one of knowing, as though she had already seen this moment unfold in her mind. "I didn't need to escape," she replied. "You were never going to capture me. You were always meant to be part of my plan, your government." They knew what they were doing. "And you, Lieutenant, you were simply a pawn." Alex's mind spun. What was she talking about? The more she spoke, the less he understood. His team had followed their orders to the letter. They had been told that capturing her would end the war. Now it felt as though everything they had been told was a lie. "You're not making any sense," Alex said, his voice tense with frustration. "We're not your pawns. We're soldiers. We fight for our people, and now we have you." Rilla shook her head slowly, as if she pitied him. "You think this war is just between humans and my empire?" she asked softly. "You think that the conflict between us has been the real fight?" Alex frowned, not sure where she was going with this. "Of course it is. You've led countless battles against us. We're not blind. We know what you've done. You've only seen part of the picture," Rilla said, her gaze intense. "What you don't realize is that this war, this endless fighting, has been designed by those who control both sides. Neither the humans nor my people are the true enemies. We've all been manipulated." Alex felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He glanced at his team, unsure whether to believe what Rilla was saying. But there was something about her words, something about the way she spoke that made him pause. Could it be true? Was the war something much bigger than just her empire? "Who's controlling us?" Alex asked, his voice low. "Who's pulling the strings?" Rilla stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. The ones who have always controlled the flow of power in the galaxy. The ones who feed on the chaos. You've been fighting for a cause that was never truly your own. The war was a tool, a distraction. And you, Lieutenant, you've been a part of it without even realizing it. Alex wanted to argue, to push back against her words, but he couldn't find the words. The more she spoke, the more it sounded like the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, though the picture was still unclear. "What do you want from me?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rilla's lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't one of triumph, it was one of understanding. "I don't want anything from you, Lieutenant. I want you to understand. The truth is the weapon you've been seeking. Once you see it, once you finally understand, you'll realize why you've been fighting all along." Alex's mind was spinning. Nothing made sense. He'd been trained to fight enemies, to capture threats, to follow orders without question. But now, with Rilla's words hanging in the air, he couldn't ignore the doubt that had taken root in his mind. What if she was right? What if everything he had believed was wrong? Before he could respond, Rilla stepped back. "We have much to talk about, but I am not your enemy. You will soon see who the real enemy is." With those words, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the room, leaving Alex and his team to grapple with the truth that was now slowly unraveling before them. Alex stood in the dark chamber, his thoughts racing. Rilla's words had unsettled him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was caught in something much larger than he had ever imagined. He had been sent on this mission with clear orders. Capture the alien Empress, end the war. It had seemed so simple, but now everything was falling apart. Rilla had made him question everything he had believed about the war, about his duty, and about the people he was fighting for. "Lieutenant, what do we do now?" One of his soldiers, Private Harris, asked, his voice shaky. The fear in Harris's tone was hard to miss. They'd been trained for combat, but none of them had been prepared for this. No one had expected Rilla to be so calm, so in control. Alex looked around the room, his eyes narrowing. "Stay alert. We need to find a way out of here." But as he spoke, another thought began to take shape in his mind. Rilla hadn't tried to escape, hadn't resisted. She had been waiting for them, letting them play right into her hands. He needed to figure out why. They continued to move through the strange compound, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The silence was deafening, and every shadow seemed to hide a new threat. The walls of the compound seemed to close in on them, as if the very place was alive, watching their every move. They were being led somewhere, but Alex didn't know where. He wasn't sure if he should be following Rilla's path or finding a way back to the surface. "Do you think she was telling the truth?" Sergeant Daniels asked, his voice low. "The war being a distraction, about us being manipulated?" Alex didn't answer immediately, wasn't sure what to think. He had always believed that the war was just a fight for survival, that the Empress was the villain and the humans were the heroes. But now Rilla's words haunted him. What if she was right? What if the war was being controlled by someone else? And what if they, the soldiers, were just pawns in a much larger game? "I don't know," Alex finally said, his voice tight. "But we need to figure that out. If what she said is true, then everything we've been fighting for has been a lie." Reached a large, open chamber at the heart of the compound. It was filled with strange technology, glowing consoles, alien machinery, and screens displaying what looked like maps of the galaxy. At the far end of the room was a massive spherical device, its surface covered in glowing symbols Alex couldn't read. The device seemed to hum with energy, and for a moment, Alex felt a chill run down his spine. Rilla was standing next to the device, her back turned to them. She didn't move as Alex and his team entered. It was as if she had been expecting them. "Why are we here?" Alex demanded, his hand resting on his weapon. "What is this place?" Rilla turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. "This is where everything begins, Lieutenant. This is the heart of the war." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. "What do you mean?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The room seemed to close in on him as the truth began to settle in. "The war was never about me," Rilla said, stepping toward the device. It was never about my empire or your people. It was about power. The ones who control this device control the galaxy. They've been using us both humans and aliens, pawns in their game. They've been feeding on the chaos, keeping us fighting each other so they can keep their grip on the universe. Alex's mind reeled. Who are they? Who's behind all of this? Rilla smiled, but it wasn't a smile of victory. It was a smile of sadness, as if she knew the answer would change everything. The ones you think you are fighting for are the ones who sent you on this mission are the same ones who have been pulling the strings all along? Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had always trusted his government, believed in their cause. But now it seemed as though everything was falling apart. They've used you, Rilla continued. Your people are just as much a part of this plan as mine. The ones in charge of your government, your military leaders, they've been working with the alien warlords for years, ensuring that this war never ends. They've created an endless cycle of conflict to keep their power. Alex took a step back, his head spinning.
That can't be true. It's been about survival.
That. Rilla's eyes softened. It was real for you. People. But it was never about survival for the ones in charge. It was always about control. They want to keep the galaxy divided, to keep it in chaos, so they can rule from the shadows. Alex felt the weight of her words crashing down on him. The war he had fought in, the missions he had completed, the battles he had survived, they had all been part of someone else's plan. He wasn't the hero he thought he was. He was just another pawn, a piece in a much larger game. Then what now? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. What do we do? Rilla stepped closer to him, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and determination. We stop them. Together, Alex's mind raced. He'd always been taught to fight for his people, to follow his orders without question. But now he had to make a choice. Was he going to continue following the orders of those who had manipulated him, or was he going to stand with Rilla and fight for the truth? Before he could answer, the room suddenly lit up, and the ground shook beneath their feet. The walls seemed to close in around them, and Alex heard the sound of distant voices. He spun around, but there was no sign of danger. Only the sound of footsteps approaching. We're not alone, Alex muttered, his hand gripping his weapon tightly. Rilla's expression turned serious. The ones in charge have found us. The trap is closing. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, echoing off the cold walls of the chamber. Alex's hand tightened around his weapon, and his team took defensive positions, ready for whatever was coming. The air felt thick with tension, and Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of everything he had just learned. His world was changing in ways he had never imagined. Stay calm, Alex ordered, his voice steady. The team's nerves were on edge, but they trusted him. He could see it in their eyes. They were ready to follow his lead. Even if they didn't fully understand the situation, Rilla didn't move, her expression unchanged. She had been the one to expose the truth, to reveal the manipulation that had been going on for so long. Now, as the footsteps drew closer, she seemed to know something else was coming. Something worse? Who's coming? Alex asked, his voice sharp. What are we walking into? Rilla turned toward him, her eyes meeting his with a strange intensity. You're about to find out, she said quietly. But you need to be ready for what's to come. Alex didn't have time to ask more questions. The door at the far end of the chamber slid open with a soft hiss. A group of soldiers entered, but they weren't like the usual alien forces Alex had fought against. These soldiers wore dark uniforms with insignia he didn't recognize. They weren't human, but they weren't from Rilla's empire either. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Who were they, and why were they here? The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. His face was hidden behind a black helmet, but his voice was cold and commanding. Empress Rilla, the leader said, his voice echoing through the chamber. We've come to finish what we started. Alex felt his grip tighten on his weapon. He knew he couldn't let these soldiers take Rilla, not after everything she had revealed. But who were they? Were they part of the conspiracy that Rilla had talked about? Before he could make a move, Rilla raised her hand, signaling for her soldiers to stand down. I've been expecting you, she said, her voice calm. But you've made a mistake, the leader of the soldiers scoffed. You've been running this game for too long, Empress. The war is over. It's time for you to step down and face the consequences. Rila's eyes hardened, but she didn't flinch. You think I'm the one who's been running things? She asked, her voice growing colder. You're more of a pawn than any of us. The real enemy is still out there, and they've been controlling you just as much as they've been controlling me. The soldiers looked confused, and the leader hesitated for a moment. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice lowering in suspicion. Rilla took a step toward him. The ones you've been serving, the ones who told you to come after me, they are the ones pulling the strings. They've been using you, just like they've used my empire and your people. But you're too blind to see it. Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. Rilla had just revealed another layer of the conspiracy, one that had been hidden from him and his team. He'd always thought the enemy was clear. But now, the lines between friend and foe were blurring. And he was beginning to understand just how deep the deception ran. The leader of the soldiers took a step back, clearly shaken by Rilla's words. But before he could respond, one of the soldiers behind him stepped forward, a small device in his hand. He pressed a button, and a holographic screen appeared in front of them. On the screen was an image of a man-human, middle-aged, with dark hair and sharp features. Alex's breath caught in his throat when he saw the man's face. It was someone he knew, someone he had worked with during his training. General Novak, the leader of the soldiers, said, his voice trembling. We've been following his orders all along. He told us to capture you, Rilla. Rilla looked at the screen with a look of cold recognition. General Novak, she said softly. Of course, he's the one behind it all. Alex felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. General Novak had always been a respected leader in the human military. He had always spoken of honor, loyalty, and duty. But now, Alex saw him for what he truly was, a part of the larger conspiracy that had been manipulating everyone. The man who had sent him on this mission, the man who had commanded him to capture. Rilla was one of the puppet masters pulling the strings. You're saying Novak has been behind everything? Alex asked, his voice low with anger. The war? The manipulation? All of it. Rilla nodded. Yes, he's the one who's been feeding the conflict between your people and mine. He's been working with others in the shadows, ensuring that the war never ends. But it's not just the war he's after. He wants control of the galaxy. And he'll do anything to get it. The soldiers, still processing Rilla's words, seemed uncertain. They had been following Novak's orders without question, but now they were faced with a truth they hadn't known. Why didn't you just tell us this sooner? Alex asked, his voice shaking with frustration. Rilla's eyes softened. Because I needed you to see the truth for yourself. I needed you to understand that you're not the enemy, and neither am I. Alex's mind was spinning. The more he learned, the less he understood. But one thing was clear. General Novak was the true enemy, and now it was up to him and Rilla to stop him before he could destroy everything. I won't let him win, Alex said, his voice filled with determination. Not after everything we've been through. Rilla nodded. Then it's time to join forces. Together we'll stop him. We can't do it alone. We need to unite the people who are still in the dark, those who don't know they're being controlled. Alex knew it was a risk, but after everything he had learned, after seeing the truth with his own eyes, he knew it was the only option. As Rilla spoke of alliances and plans, Alex couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They weren't enemies anymore. They were allies in a fight for the galaxy's future. This time they were going to make sure the truth won. Alex stood in the chamber, the weight of the truth pressing down on him like a heavy stone. He had come to capture Rilla, to follow orders and bring an end to the war. But now, everything had changed. The true enemy wasn't the alien Empress. It wasn't even the alien empire she ruled. The real enemy was General Novak, the man who had sent Alex on this mission. Novak had been manipulating both sides of the war, and now Alex was part of something much bigger than he had ever realized. His mind raced with thoughts of betrayal. For years he had followed Novak's commands without question, believing that the general was a man of honor and duty. But now Alex understood the truth. Novak had been using him, using everyone, to fuel a never-ending war. And that war was the key to his control over the galaxy. "We need to move quickly," Rilla said, breaking Alex out of his thoughts. She was standing next to the strange device in the center of the room, her eyes scanning the data on the holographic screen that had appeared earlier. "The longer we stay here, the more likely it is that Novak's forces will catch up to us." Alex nodded, but his mind was still spinning. "How do you know so much about Novak? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Rilla glanced at him, her face serious. "Because I needed you to see it for yourself. You needed to understand that Novak isn't just some general. He's part of the system that controls everything. He's the one who's been making the decisions, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. He's the one who has kept this war going for so long." Alex clenched his fists, frustration building inside him. "I've fought for him. I've trusted him. And now I find out he's been using me all along." "I know how you feel," Rilla said softly. "The truth is, we can't change what's already been done. All we can do now is stop him from controlling the galaxy any longer." Suddenly, the door to the chamber slammed open, and several soldiers burst in. They were not the same soldiers that Alex had seen before. These were human soldiers, wearing the same dark uniforms as those who had followed Novak's orders. Alex's heart sank. These were the ones Novak had sent to finish what they had started. "Stop right there," one of the soldiers shouted, raising his weapon at Alex and Rilla. Alex didn't hesitate. He'd been trained for moments like this. Trained to act quickly and decisively. Without thinking, he drew his weapon and aimed it at the soldier. "Drop your weapons," Alex commanded, his voice steady. But the soldier didn't lower his weapon. Instead, he smiled, a cold, twisted smile that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. "You're too late," the soldier said. "General Novak already knows everything. He's been watching you, Lieutenant. He knew exactly what you were going to do." Alex's mind raced. "What do you mean? What do you mean Novak's been watching me?" The soldier laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the chamber. "You think this was about Rilla? About capturing the Empress? No, this was always about you, Alex. You're the one Novak needed to keep in line. He sent you here to do the dirty work, to weaken Rilla's empire. And when you failed, he knew you'd come back. He knew you'd try to stop him. And now, it's too late. We've already won." The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. He'd been used, not just by Novak, but by the system that had sent him on this mission. He had been a tool, nothing more. His loyalty, his duty, had been taken advantage of, and now everything was falling apart. Rilla stepped forward, her eyes narrowing at the soldier. "You're wrong," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This war ends now." The soldier raised his weapon, but Alex moved faster. Without thinking, he lunged at the soldier, knocking him to the ground. The weapon clattered out of his hands, and Alex quickly disarmed him, holding the weapon against the soldier's throat. "I'm not your pawn anymore," Alex said, his voice cold, "and I'm not going to let you win." The soldier's eyes flickered with fear, but then he smirked. "You think you can stop us? Novak is already one step ahead. You're just a soldier, Alex, nothing more." "Maybe, but I'm a soldier who's done following orders." The soldier's smirk faded as Alex pulled him to his feet and shoved him toward the door. "Get out of here. Tell Novak I'm coming for him." The soldier hesitated, but then he backed away, running out of the room, his footsteps fading into the distance. Alex exhaled, his body shaking from the rush of adrenaline. He looked at Rilla, who was standing quietly by the device. "What now?" Alex asked, his voice still steady. But filled with uncertainty, Rilla walked over to him, her expression thoughtful. "Now we take the fight to Novak. We expose him for who he really is.
Ow.
And we make sure that he can never manipulate anyone again." Alex nodded, determination filling him. He had lost everything: his trust in his government, his sense of duty, but he hadn't lost his will to fight. He wasn't going to let Novak win. Not now, not ever. As they moved toward the exit, Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of what was ahead of them. They were up against the most powerful man in the galaxy, someone who had been controlling everything from the shadows. But Alex was no longer the pawn. He was the one who was going to make the move, and this time he wasn't going to stop until the truth came out. The escape from the compound had been chaotic. Alex and Ryla barely made it out, their path lit only by the dim glow of emergency lights. As they ran through the dark corridors, Alex could hear the sounds of soldiers following them, shouting orders, trying to close in. The weight of what they had just learned hung heavily on him. General Novak's true plan, the endless manipulation of both sides, was all coming to light, and now Alex was determined to put an end to it. "We need to get to the surface," Alex said, his voice sharp. "We can't stay down here. Novak's men will track us down," Rilla nodded. "Agreed. But first, we need to gather allies. We can't fight Novak's forces alone, not now." Alex looked at her, confusion flashing in his eyes. Allies. After everything, who would still stand with you? And why would anyone trust me after what's happened? Rilla gave him a small smile. The truth has a way of finding its way out, even in the darkest of times. We have more support than you think. There are factions within your government who have been trying to warn you, trying to stop Novak. They just didn't know who to trust. As they rounded a corner, they found a door leading to a stairwell. Alex pushed it open and motioned for Rilla to follow. "So, you're telling me there are people in my government who want to stop Novak?" "Yes," Rilla said, her tone calm. "They've been too afraid to act alone. They've been watching Novak's rise to power, and they've seen the way he's manipulated the war. They're ready to fight, but they need leadership. They need someone to lead them." Alex's heart raced. Could he really be that leader? Could he take on Novak, knowing that the odds were stacked so high against them? But there was something else, something that burned inside him. He had already been used by Novak. Now he was ready to fight back, not just for his people, but for the truth. "We'll need a plan," Alex said, stopping at the top of the stairs to catch his breath. "We have one," Rilla replied. "But it's not going to be easy. Novak's forces are everywhere, and he controls most of the galaxy's communications. We need to get to his stronghold. That's where he's hiding. If we can expose him, if we can make the truth public, the war will end." "How do we get to Novak's stronghold?" Alex asked, glancing at Rilla. "And how do we take him down?" Ella looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll need to get to the heart of his operation. There's a place called the Central Nexus, a command center deep in his territory. It's where all his plans are coordinated. It's also where the truth about his involvement in the war is hidden. If we can get there, we can destroy everything he's worked for." Alex nodded. "You think we can get there without getting caught?" Rilla didn't hesitate. "We don't have a choice. If we stay here, Novak will catch us. But if we go to the Nexus, we'll have a chance to expose him and end this war. We have to act fast." Alex could feel the weight of what they were about to do. They were about to take on the most powerful man in the galaxy, someone who had manipulated both sides of the war for his own gain. But Alex had made up his mind. He wasn't going to run anymore. He wasn't going to be Novak's pawn. "Let's do it," Alex said, his voice firm. "We take the fight to Novak." Ella smiled, a look of respect in her eyes. "Good. I knew you'd come around."
Ow!
They quickly moved out of the building and into the streets of the alien city. It was dark outside and the air felt thick with tension. But Alex felt a strange sense of clarity. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of something bigger. He had a mission, and this time it was his choice. He wasn't going to follow anyone else's orders. This time, he was the one leading the charge. As they made their way through the city, Alex kept a sharp eye out for any signs of Novak's forces. They had to move quickly, but they also had to be careful. If they were spotted, their entire plan would fall apart. They eventually reached a small, hidden ship that had been prepared for them by one of Rila's allies. The ship was small and unmarked, perfect for a quiet getaway. As they boarded, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. They were about to embark on a dangerous journey to Novak's stronghold, and there was no turning back. "Ready?" Rilla asked, glancing at him as she took the controls. Alex nodded. Let's go. The sooner we get there, the sooner we can end this. Ship lifted off silently, disappearing into the night sky. As they traveled through the dark expanse of space, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The war, the lies, the manipulation, they had all led to this moment. It was up to him and Rila to stop Novak and expose the truth. But there was one thing Alex knew for sure. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the future of the galaxy, and he wasn't going to let Novak win.